One of the biggest mysteries of The Lord of the Rings is what happened to the Entwives. Well, between you and me, they were likely destroyed by Sauron during the Second Age. However, their existence in the first place begs another question. How did the Ents and the Entwives reproduce to create the Entlings? To answer this question, we must first deal with a fundamental misunderstanding regarding the Ents. A misunderstanding that stems largely from the movie trilogy. When people ask this question, they tend to ask it under the belief that the Ents and the Entwives are simply trees that happen to be sentient. For all intents and purposes, they're literally just that, trees who can move and are aware of themselves. It makes sense why people have this assumption, as this is essentially how they were presented to us in the movies. And subsequently, people begin to wonder how these literal gendered trees interacted to make a little tree. The thing is, if you look at Lord of the Rings art that predates the trilogy, you'll begin to see a pattern. The Ents look a lot more humanoid than we are used to in the modern day. And these illustrations are actually consistent with Tolkien's writings and world building. In The Two Towers, it is written that they found that they were looking at a most extraordinary face. It belonged to a large man-like, almost troll-like figure, at least 14 foot high, very sturdy with a tall head and hardly any neck. Whether it was clad in stuff like green and grey bark, or whether that was its hide, was difficult to say. At any rate, the arms, at a short distance from the trunk, were not wrinkled, but covered with a brown, smooth skin. The large feet had 7 toes each. The lower part of the long face was covered with a sweeping grey beard, bushy, almost twiggy at the roots, thin and mossy at the ends. But at the moment, the hobbits noted little but the eyes. These deep eyes were now surveying them, slow and solemn, but very penetrating. References to a smooth skin points toward a creature that has gradually come to resemble a tree due to its habitat and purpose, but which nevertheless remains humanoid. They have houses to live in, beds and furniture. And, not to mention, there are references from Treebeard that directly differentiate trees and Ents, and which explain the similarities between the two as shepherds and sheep growing more and more alike. Despite this, a shepherd and a sheep are two very different things. We are tree herds, we old Ents. Few enough of us are left now. Sheep get like shepherd, and shepherds like sheep, it is said, but slowly, and neither have long in the world. It is quicker and closer with trees and Ents, and they walk down the ages together. In essence, the Ents are more akin to a human wearing a tree costume as opposed to a tree with human characteristics. As Peter Jackson leaned more towards the latter interpretation, however, the question regarding their method of reproduction became all the more apparent. Now, from the Silmarillion, we know that the Ents were essentially spirits brought forth by Eru Ilúvatar at the request of the Vala Yavanna, originally as an answer to the creation of the dwarfs by Aule the Smith and for the sake of protecting the forests of Middle-earth. Then Manwë awoke, and he went down to Yavanna upon Ezelohar, and he sat beside her beneath the 2 trees. And Manwë said, O Kementari, Eru hath spoken, saying, Do then any of the Valar suppose that I did not hear all the song, even the least sound of the least voice? Behold, when the children awake, then the thought of Yavanna will awake also, and it will summon spirits from afar, and they will go among the Kelvar and the Olvar, and some will dwell therein and be held in reverence, and their just anger shall be feared. For a time, while the firstborn are in their power, and while the secondborn are young. But dost thou not now remember, Kementari, that thy thought sang not always alone? Did not thy thought and mine meet also, so that we took wing together like great birds that soar above the clouds? That also shall come to be by the heat of Ilúvatar, and before the children awake, there shall go forth with wings like the wings of the eagles of the lords of the west. All of the children of Ilúvatar reproduce normally, and we even have examples of the Ainur, who were also spirits, having children. This consistency with the other creatures of Middle-earth, in addition to Tolkien deliberately creating a humanoid Ent and Entwife dynamic and relationship structure, all point to the conclusion that the Ents reproduced like mammals. This is further reinforced by the trolls, who were definitively mammals, being described as imitations of the Ents. But if we assume that this is actually wrong, then how would the Ents reproduce under the understanding that they were simple trees? Whereas with mammals, mating between one male and one female leads to internal fertilization, embryo development, and eventually birth, trees and plants in general operate very differently. Essentially, the sexual process would involve pollination, meaning the transfer of pollen from the male to the female parts, either by the wind or animals. This would be followed by fertilization, which would develop into seeds, which are then scattered by the elements, and, if everything goes well, the seed sprouts and eventually becomes a tree. Of course, there is also asexual reproduction, which essentially refers to a tree cloning itself by developing new stems within the original root system. Different trees have different specifics of how this process works, but I think you get the idea. Obviously, asexual reproduction would not be particularly in theme in the context of the information we have or the existence of the Entwives. As for sexual reproduction, this process usually involves a number of trees together and would not be consistent with the type of monogamous relationship between Ent and Entwife described in Tolkien's writings. Then again, this is a fantasy work, you may argue, and you would be right that we should not be limiting ourselves in such a way. This is why I think the strongest arguments involve the circumstantial evidence that the Ents were closer to a type of animal or humanoid than an actual tree. This, combined with a bit of Occam's razor, indicates that the simplest and most consistent answer is that the Ents engaged in sexual intercourse like standard mammals. I think the simplest answer, being the correct one, is also consistent with Tolkien not spending much time delving into this question in the first place. His concern was not the details of Ent reproduction, or to write an exhaustive explanation of it. Instead, he wished to add to the mystery of his world, ask questions about the fate of this species, and contribute to his wider world-building through their history. Nonetheless, I am certain that while he was writing of the Ents, the Entwives, and especially the Entlings, the thought must have absolutely crossed his mind. The fact that he described the Ents as essentially being camouflaged as trees, but not literally being ones, in addition to their correlation with the mammal trolls and their intertwined history with the dwarves, who also reproduce normally, Tolkien may have thought that this was enough information. After all, a question like this was neither the point of the book, nor a matter of even secondary importance to the subplot of the Ents in the Two Towers. Therefore, no reason to state it outright. Either way, as with anything regarding Middle-earth and Tolkien's wider world-building, it is always interesting to ask such questions, and especially if you can reach a conclusion with the evidence that Tolkien himself provides. A massive thank you to my channel members, and thank you very much for watching.